Thanks, Aarti. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm here to walk us through, how Sprinto can make your life easier around security compliances. And yeah, without further ado, let's dive in. Here's a rough roadmap of what I want to cover during this talk. I'll do a brief introduction about myself and the context that I have to compliances. After which, we'll look at why we do even need these compliances. What problem do they really solve for us, or why do we get asked for these compliances by sometimes some of the other customers or stakeholders in the company? And how exactly do these things work? What do you need to worry about while you are going through this process, and what do you need to worry about as you scale your company and your business, and what are the implications of compliances about it? And that's it. We'll wrap at the end of it all. um, so to so a little bit more about me. The I think the thing, the important thing is that I'm an engineer first. I'm happiest when I'm writing code and building things. And before Sprinto, I co-founded another B2B SaaS company called RecruiterBox. So RecruiterBox, we grew RecruiterBox to more than 2,500 customers from 2011 to 2017. And the largest chunk of our customers was in the US. And during that journey was my first tryst with compliances. We had a majority of our customers in the US, and we were constantly getting asked for SOC 2. And for a while we winged it. We just to say that, hey, we are hosted on AWS, and AWS is SOC 2 compliant, so we're good, right? And it worked for a while, but it was very clear that this wasn't going to fly anymore, especially when we started working with larger and larger customers. So after kicking the can down the road for a while, we finally decided to bite the bullet and go through the compliance journey. And suffices to say that it was an incredibly painful affair. So 6 months and tens of thousands of dollars later, there was still no light at the end of the tunnel. And sometime later, when we exited RecruiterBox, and when I was thinking of starting up again, that experience of what happened at RecruiterBox was one of the most important reasons why we picked to solve this problem at Sprinto. We've been working on Sprinto for a while now, and through the process of this, I've seen hundreds of companies go through their compliance journey. And that's sort of given me like a front row seat to what these compliances mean, where the gotchas are, where they become painful, where are the places where people tend to burn their fingers, and so on and so forth. So happy to share some of those experiences as we go along this conversation. Right. Um, the main reason that most of you are here, and I suspect a large number of you are B2B SaaS companies, and the what we typically see as you go through a sales cycle in a B2B SaaS company, especially with some of your most valuable and larger customers, is that you go through this entire journey, right, where there is a first touch point. You do a demo, you sort of find your champion in your customer environment. You work closely with them, you get their stakeholder buy-in, then you sort of go through the entire phase of negotiating, etc. And you're at the last inch. This deal is about to close, is when it sort of dawns upon you that, hey, there's a security review step involved. And this is where you get asked for these compliances like SOC 2 or ISO, or depending on the context and the industry and the segment that you're working with, maybe some things like GDPR or HIPAA or PCI, and etc. And this is where it starts becoming painful. Like, it really hurts that after putting all of that effort and coming to this last point, you still need to cross over this hurdle. And if you don't already have these compliances in hand by then, you start getting into this messy situations about what do you need to do here, how can you navigate this situation, and it starts becoming really, really painful. So this is where, for a large number of companies that I have seen and worked with, this is the place where the security review or the security due diligence is the place where compliance starts becoming most important. And this is the reason why most companies tend to choose to become compliant with either SOC 2 or HIPAA or GDPR or whatever it is. Now, um, it helps to understand that these are not artificial barriers that your customers are putting in front of you or stakeholders are putting in front of you. As a cloud hosted SaaS company, what it fundamentally means is that my data is on your servers, and it is natural that I want to have some assurance that you're keeping this data safe and secure. And compliances are nothing but a set of security practices that you should follow in order to protect the data that you're hosting on your customers' behalf. And that's the reason why they really ask you for these things. So, at its heart, most compliances, or at least the ones that tend to get asked very often, like SOC 2 and ISO, they are third-party audited compliances, which means that they inherently carry more credibility, because an accredited or attested auditor is going to actually examine your security practices and say whether you're actually following a given framework. And as you can imagine, this creates a lot more confidence and assurance that you're actually doing these practices, rather than you just claiming that you are secure, or you're sharing some security white paper, or just answering like a security questionnaire, because all of these are just self proclamations. Whereas some of the security compliances tend to be third party audited and consequently carry a lot more credibility. um, it is for companies who actually are compliant, it is very clear, and this has been an unanimous feedback that you have seen, that it helps you actually shorten your sales cycles. It helps you pass your security due diligence stages with a lot more seamless manner. And that's very useful for you as you go through this process, and it has a direct impact to your revenue and your top line. This is also especially important if you're a young upstart, and it helps you look a lot more formidable and dependable. And this is especially important. You get a lot of these questions in some of your conversations, where they ask you, "Hey, how large are you? How long have you been around? How many customers you have? Um, are you funded or not?" And these are all proxies for them to find out whether are you going to be around tomorrow. Are you basically just disappear, and like, are you going to do something funny with all the data that we are sharing with you? So it's really important to understand that compliances help you look formidable and establish yourself as a brand, especially when you're talking with your customers. And the other thing that I've curiously seen increasingly now is that people have started using compliances as one of the ways to wedge out the competition. This can work both for and against you, and it allows you to look on par with some of your or more established competition as well. And I think the overall thing that I would say over here is that, rather than looking at compliances as one of the things that you can use as a defensive tactic when you're asked for security related questions, I'm increasingly seeing modern companies try and to do this as a go on the front foot and deal with this, which means that they are going to lead with compliance. They actually say upfront that they are they're compliant with a standard or an industry recognized standard, and that helps them just drive more assurance and more confidence, and they look a lot more formidable. So it's increasingly common that people talk about this upfront in their sales decks and lead with it, rather than just use it as a defensive tactic. Right. So that's all good, but compliances are also incredibly daunting to get to, and this is especially worse when you don't have a dedicated internal teams for this, which most fast-growing young startups won't have. And like I was saying earlier, I got a front row seat to this, and it typically just takes hundreds of hours, and it requires a lot of painstaking, error-prone, busy work. And not just that, right? At the end of the whole thing, it's just mired with a lot of uncertainty and jargon, and just a lot of things that don't seem to make a lot of sense. And you seem to be doing all of this work just to check a box, and it just seems like a lot of work. So it is very natural, or very conventionally, companies do spend hundreds of hours on this. And the question really that most people start asking is, hey, is this worth it? And this is something that I really want to do or not. Now, while it looks so daunting from the outside, at its heart, compliance is quite simple. At its heart, it's actually simply a set of security practices, which you can call your security program. And these security practices are designed to minimize the security risks to the data that you're trying to protect, which is typically customers' data or any sensitive data that you might be processing as a company. And if you just look at it this way, right, it's about coming up with the security practices that minimize the security risks, and that's all there is to it. Of course, there are specific nuances, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But what you really need to do now is think of all the security practices that you need to implement those practices, operate that security practices, or operate that security program, and then at the end of the day, go through an audit with the security program. And in short, that's the simplest thing you need to understand about compliance. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically about what happens in each of these steps, but that's the heart of it. And the outcome of a good compliance program is you ought to actually become a lot more secure at the end of it. If that's not happening, then you're just running something for a checkbox reason, or it's what is typically called as paper compliance, right? But a good compliance program should actually give you not just the checkbox to drive assurance with your customers, but at the same time actually make you a lot more secure. Right. So it if a compliance program is around security practices, it's useful to ask, what do these security practices need to do? Like, what's the aim of the security practices? And the reason you implementing the security practices is to reduce the risks to your sensitive data. And these risks come from naturally occurring entities that affect your data directly or indirectly. Like, so if you think about the sensitive data that you process as a company, and you think of all the things that can directly or indirectly affect this data, you can start seeing a list of entities in your company. And this could be employees or interns or contractors, what we can collectively call as staff members. This could be your databases or services that you use on your infrastructure, like servers or EC2 instances or Lambda functions or whatnot. These are the second category of things. These could be laptops and devices that your employees are using in order to actually do their work. This could be your code repositories and so on and so forth. So these are all the entities that are in your environment that directly or indirectly affect your sensitive data. And then what you really need to think about is, you need to make a list of all the entities that affect your sensitive data. And now you need to think about the kind of risks that could occur on these entities, and how can you mitigate them. And of course, if you really think about it, the security measures that you need to have on the entities are contextual to what the entity does. So for example, right, I have a database, and then what I would like to do is that not keep it on a public internet, so that people cannot unauthorized access to it is not possible just from the open internet. You need to encrypt the database at rest. You need to make sure that you're taking regular backups of the database, and so on and so forth. So depending on what the kind of the entity or the context of the entity, you will be doing a certain set of or implementing a certain kind of security practices on them. If you have code repositories and if you have some planned pull requests that are happening, then you might want to keep track of all the pull requests and make sure that they're getting reviewed by somebody else apart from the author of the change, and so on and so forth. So this is the simplest way to think about security. And the important point that I would like to take away over here is that unless you actually enlist all the entities and the corresponding security practices, you'll always be leaving yourself open to security gaps. And as a result, your compliance would be at risk. So without enlisting entities and the corresponding security practices, there is no compliance. Like, this is the smartest way to take yourself through a compliance journey. Right now, let's say you implemented a security practices at some point in time. Does that mean are we done? Is there anything else? No. So basically, what needs to happen is that you need to ensure that the security practices are continuing to operate consistently over a period of time. And the natural nature of any company is that over the year, there are various things that are happening in your company's environment. Like, employees and contractors are joining, leaving, ad hoc servers are brought up, decommissioned, vulnerabilities are found and fixed, pull requests are getting created and deployed on a daily basis. So there's a lot of changes that are happening on a consistent basis in your company. And compliance requires continuous monitoring of these entities, and you need to keep on monitoring your entities, seeing whether the context has changed, and implementing the security practices in a timely manner. So without continuous monitoring of entities, your compliance program will deteriorate over time. You need to understand that a lot of these compliance programs, like SOC 2, for example, inherently has an observation period. Even an ISO compliance program would have a surveillance audit at the end of the year, where the auditor is going to try and see whether you continue to maintain the security practices over a period of time and not just at a point in time. So, the important thing to understand when you're going through the operate phase is that you need to keep doing this on a consistent basis and make sure that your practices are running again and again and over a time period of time continuously. Right. So after implementing and operating your security program, now you still need to go through an audit. And audits are nothing but a third-party review of three things. They are going to audit all the entities in your environment, the security measures that you actually have on them, and the evidence that you actually maintained the security practices over them throughout the audit period. And what happens as a result is when you continuously monitor entities, you are automatically compliant and in a continuous manner. So what really happens here is that you can now sleep easy knowing that you are continuously compliant, you're continuously collecting evidence, and you can actually breeze through your audits like never before. And so the important thing to understand is that with continuous compliance at entity level, you can actually go through this entire journey in a lot more seamless and smooth manner. Now, just to uh, understand and go into a little bit about what Sprinto specifically does for you, is that Sprinto is fundamentally a continuous entity monitoring platform. And what we do is we integrate with a bunch of services that your company uses. And through these integrations, we actually continuously monitor all the entities that are in their environment, and we run security measures on them, and this is powered through integration, and this creates an extremely scalable foundation for you. See, what we really implemented here for you is a security program, and as a result of having this security program in place, what happens is that your security program can scale to multiple compliances together. Our security program is already pre-mapped to thousands of requirements across 10 plus compliance frameworks, and this breadth of compliances is always increasing. So if you want more compliances, it's really super easy with minimal extra work, because most of the security program can be reused, or the security practices that you have done for one compliance can be reused for another. So for example, Sprinto's ISO program and SOC 2 program have 95% plus overlap, and because the goal of both is security, and the common base gives you massive scalability, and you're not doing a 0 to 1 journey, and you don't get mired into all of the rituals that happen corresponding to each of these frameworks, but actually you focus more on the actual practices that give you the benefit of being compliant and make you more secure. Right. Now, if you really look at continuous monitoring or continuous entity monitoring, what it really does for you is that it actually gives you a solid foundation and a base that is actually improving your security. And this way of doing compliance means that the alternate ways, including alternate tool based ways of doing this, they tend to treat it more like checking a box just so to make the auditor happy. But this way of doing things with continuous entity monitoring actually makes you more secure, and that has a bunch of advantages to you as you're growing a fast growing SaaS company. Specifically among them is you get a lot better security posture. You're not pushing things under the rug. You actually become more secure in the process. Second, this actually makes your audits a lot more efficient. You get through the audit through the implement and the operate phase with fewer steps, with less effort, and you get more leverage around every step of effort that you put. You remain more focused on the things that actually make you secure, rather than worrying about all the busy work that happens around just paperwork that's related to compliance. Again, having a base foundational framework is extremely useful to help you scale to more frameworks effectively. Like I was saying, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the intent and the security practices that are actually required across a large number of frameworks. So you could do SOC 2 today, and tomorrow you might want to do NIST or CSA star or GDPR or one of these privacy frameworks, and you'll start seeing a lot of overlap between them, simply because you implemented a great foundational security program and a privacy program. The other advantage of actually monitoring your entities rather than just implementing templated blanket checks is that you get less bloat. What I mean by that is your compliance program is actually adapted to your specific environment, and you're not running unnecessary security practices on irrelevant entities in your environment, and that fundamentally gives you more speed. There are many times where companies find themselves shackled after running a compliance program, because they just seem to slow themselves down by just some of these overheads that get added purely for reasons to make the auditor happy, while they're not by themselves adding any value to your security as such. But when you actually do this monitoring at an entity level, these kind of cases don't happen, and as a result you're actually getting value out of it, and you are actually improving your speed with confidence rather than slowing yourself down. Also, when you actually track each and every entity, what tends to happen is that you're improving your security without increasing the amount of manual work and the to-do list and evidence tasks that you'll typically have to do, as if you're looking at this from other tools perspective. This is incredibly powerful for you. on an ongoing basis, your security grows instead of your work growing. And the biggest benefit of this all is that when the rubber hits the road, which is audit time, your audits can become a lot more seamless. Sprinto internally maps all the evidence and the continuous monitoring that has happened automatically to what the auditors need to see, and the auditors are very happy to get to see that, hey, you're actually running this continuous monitoring at an entity level, so they can ask you any question and you're always ready with the answers because all the data is out there. And it's very simple to see that, hey, you've actually been running these practices exactly the way they were supposed to be. Right. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, all of this is good, but one of the other things that we try and do at Sprinto is to make sure that you have enough help as you are actually implementing Sprinto in your environment, and this is where we put a lot of time and effort in order to ensure that you can implement the program correctly. Remember, Sprinto is designed to adapt to your environment rather than the other way around. So what we actually have is, we have a customer success manager that's assigned to you for every customer that works with Sprinto, and the way we work with you is in a completely proactive manner. So it's a lot closer to a swimming coach who is in there in the pool with you, helping you learn to swim, rather than like a lifeguard who is out there. If you ask for help, he'll come and help you from not drowning, but for the most part it's to yourself. So if you're trying to learn to swim, you'd rather have a coach than a lifeguard, and that's our approach to this entire thing. So you would actually get handheld help in order to actually implement this program. We have a very regimented steps in which we go about this, and this really helps you implement the program in a manner that's right, which you can eventually run on a consistent basis. Here are some things that people have to say about Sprinto. This is some fellow founders, CTOs, security personnel who have used Sprinto. This is out there on our public G2 page. You should go have a look at them. But happy to talk more about specific things that you might have questions about, and we will look at that as well. But these are some of the things that our customers had to say about us. And we are glad to be backed by some of the best B2B SaaS investors out there, and being backed by some of the great stalwarts in the security industry, including people who actually themselves run security companies. So this is a lot of what happens inside of Sprinto, and the way it is framed is based on experience and things that we have learned from a lot of these companies, and that's how we've actually implemented an entity-based monitoring program, a continuous entity monitoring program, and that's the benefit that you get at the end of it, because it's all of this expertise boiled into a product which you can start using, and it helps you not just become compliant but also scale your security program as you grow.